Socrates belonged to the lowest of the low. Socrates was mob, you know, and you can still see it for yourself, how ugly he was. This harsh, almost insulting line isn't from some ancient Athenian gossip. It's Nietzsche, one of the sharpest minds in philosophy, delivering his brutal verdict on Socrates. Nietzsche's problem with Socrates isn't some passing remark. It's a core theme that runs through his work like a dark current. What went wrong with Socrates? From The Birth of Tragedy, his very first book, to Twilight of the Idols, written 16 years later, Nietzsche never lets go of the question. In fact, he believes something broke the moment Socrates appeared in Athens. A golden age of Greek culture was shattered. Something beautiful, something sacred. Socrates is a disruptive force, Nietzsche writes in The Birth of Tragedy. But to understand this revolution, this decay, we must start at the beginning, the signal of a new era in Hellenism. Nietzsche doesn't see Socrates as a wise man saving Athens. The Birth of Tragedy, where Nietzsche first uncovers the real damage Socrates did to Western thought. No, he sees a man armed with a smile hiding a knife, a destroyer of all that once made Greek culture great. Socrates didn't walk into Athens preaching destruction. He walked in with questions, pretended to know nothing. He played dumb, but it was a trap. This is what Nietzsche writes. Calling on the greatest statesmen, orators, poets, and artists, he discovered everywhere the conceit of knowledge. He perceived to his astonishment that all these celebrities were without a proper and accurate insight and practiced their crafts only by instinct. That last phrase, only by instinct, is crucial. That's beauty. For Nietzsche, that's not a flaw. Greek art, Greek virtue, Greek tragedy. They weren't born from rational arguments. That's life at its highest. They came from the gut, from passion, from instinct. Socrates couldn't accept that. He demanded reasons. He exposed that Greek society, its art, its morals, its gods stood on assumptions no one could justify logically. And once he exposed the illusion, it all came crashing down. Nietzsche writes, "Wherever Socratism turns its searching eyes, it beholds the lack of insight and the power of illusion. And from this lack infers the inner perversity of existing conditions." In other words, Socrates condemned all that once made Athens glorious. And here lies the wound Nietzsche cannot forgive. Because for him, Greek culture before Socrates was not lost, it was murdered. And the weapon? Reason. Nietzsche asks a question that still haunts philosophy. How can we admire both Socrates and the heroes he destroyed? Because here's the paradox. We revere Socrates as a founding father of Western thought, but we also revere Homer, Aeschylus, Pericles, the very figures Socrates undermined. Nietzsche doesn't let us sit comfortably with this contradiction. He writes, "Here is the extraordinary hesitancy which always seizes upon us with regard to Socrates. Who is it that ventures, single-handed, to destroy a character which, as Homer, Pindar, Aeschylus, Phidias, Pericles, Pythia, and Dionysus, is sure of our wondering admiration? What kind of demonic power," Nietzsche asks, "would dare spill this magic draught, the intoxicating, instinctual brilliance of early Greek culture, into the dust?" In Daybreak, he deepens this reverence for the old world. This culture, which has its poet in Sophocles, its statesman in Pericles, its doctor in Hippocrates, this culture, combated by Plato and the Socratic schools, must have been very immoral. The truth is so complicated and entangled that we feel unwilling to unravel it. So let the old error veritas implicia, run its old course. Nietzsche is telling us, if you love Homer, if you admire the grandeur of old Hellas, then don't pretend Socrates is your friend. He is your undoing. You must choose Homer or Socrates, Dionysus or Apollo, instinct or reason. You can't have both. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche gives Socrates a dangerous new title, the first theoretical man. What does that mean? It means Socrates represents a turning point, when man began to believe that everything could be solved with logic, with reason, with argument. That theory could save us. But Nietzsche doesn't see this as progress. He sees it as decay. With Socrates, Nietzsche says, Greek taste veers around in favor of dialectics. What actually occurs in the first place? A noble taste is vanquished. Before Socrates, the Greeks followed instinct. They danced with Dionysus. They built temples without explaining why beauty mattered. They embraced tragedy as part of life. Then Socrates arrives, asking questions, demanding proof, dissecting everything. Nietzsche writes, before Socrates' time, dialectical manners were avoided in good society. They were regarded as bad manners. They were compromising. To argue was to lower yourself. But with Socrates, the mob comes to the top. The intellectual outsider, the man who had no beauty, no power, no rank, he finds a weapon in words. Nietzsche doesn't hate argument because it's wrong. He hates it because of who uses it. And why? Because he says, dialectic is a last resort. It is a weapon used by those who have no other. In a world of strength, you command. In a world of weakness, you argue. Nietzsche now makes one of his boldest claims. Dialectics is a form of revenge. Think about it. If you have no power, no beauty, no strength, no social status, what's left? Your words. And Socrates had only those. He was mocked for his looks, disregarded by Athens' elite. Born from the lowest of the low, Nietzsche even mocks his appearance. Socrates was mob, you know, and you can still see it for yourself. How ugly he was. But ugliness, which in itself is an objection, was almost a refutation among the Greeks. Was Socrates really a Greek? Nietzsche turns this into a deeper psychological critique. He asks, was Socrates' famous irony, pretending to be ignorant so he could trap others in debate, just a mask for his resentment? Is the Socratic irony an expression of revolt, of mob resentment? Does Socrates, as a creature suffering under oppression, enjoy his innate ferocity in the knife thrusts of the syllogism? Does he wreak his revenge on the nobleman he fascinates? Nietzsche suspects that beneath Socrates' gentle questions was a will to dominate, to humiliate, to triumph over those above him. That's why Socrates used arguments. Not because they lead to truth, but because they let the powerless feel powerful. And Nietzsche sees this not just as a personal strategy, but as a cultural turning point. The rise of dialectics wasn't the rise of reason, it was the rise of weakness, disguised as wisdom. This is the million-dollar question in Nietzsche's critique. If Socrates was a powerless outcast, mocked by the elites, why did Athens take him seriously? Nietzsche has a chilling answer, because Athens was already sick. In a healthy culture, Nietzsche says, a man like Socrates would have been ignored, laughed off, treated like a clown. Wherever authority still belongs to good usage, wherever men do not prove, but command, the dialectician is regarded as a sort of clown. People laugh at him. They do not take him seriously. But in Athens, they not only took him seriously, they let him reshape their entire worldview. Why? Because they were ready for him. Because their vitality was already fading. Nietzsche believed the Greeks, once strong, noble, instinctive, had grown weary, exhausted, decadent. They had lost their will to power, lost their martial spirit, lost the fierce energy that built Sparta and inspired Homer. Irritable, cowardly, unsteady, and all turned into play actors. They had more than sufficient reason to submit to having morality preached to them. Socrates didn't cause the fall. He was a symptom of it. The society that loses its instincts becomes obsessed with analysis, with safety, with morality, with rules, and eventually with philosophy. Athens listened to Socrates because it had no strength left to resist him. Nietzsche's critique of Socrates isn't just about one man. It's about a pattern, something that happens to every powerful culture when it begins to rot from within. He introduces a haunting concept, decadence, not just moral decay, but the loss of vitality, the collapse of instinct, strength, spontaneity, replaced by overthinking, rationalizing, and guilt. In the genealogy of morals, Nietzsche offers a metaphor for this decay. He writes, power must be discharged. If it cannot be discharged outward, it will turn inward. In other words, a strong society wages war outward, on enemies, on nature, on problems. A tired society wages war inward, on itself, on its instincts, on its traditions. And that's what Nietzsche says happened to the Greeks. The ancient Greek culture needed to vent their power somehow. This enormous internal tension thus discharged itself in terrible and reckless hostility. Outside the states, the various states mutually tore each other to bits, in order that each individual state could remain at peace with itself. Constant conflict kept them strong. But once peace and comfort settled in, once luxury replaced hardship, the drive for power had nowhere to go. So it turned inward, into self-criticism, into guilt, into philosophy. And that's when Socrates appeared, not as a cause but as a symptom, a mirror held up to a culture that had already begun to doubt itself. Nietzsche believed this same process explained Christianity's rise after Rome, a weak empire, embracing a slave morality, and now he sees Socrates as the same turning point for Greece. The problem isn't just that Socrates ruined Greece, it's that we still admire him. We put Socrates on a pedestal, call him the father of Western philosophy. We teach his methods, praise his logic, quote his sayings as wisdom. But Nietzsche says that admiration is itself a symptom. We revere Socrates because we too are decadent, just like the Athens that accepted him. We too have lost touch with instinct, with strength, with spontaneity. We too are obsessed with reason, analysis, morality, with words over life. The philosophical tradition holds Socrates in high esteem. Nietzsche writes, because the tradition itself is decadence. Because we're all decadent, we don't even realize it. Like fish in water, we swim in the legacy of Socrates and call it reality. But Nietzsche, ever the outsider, saw this invisible water, and he hated it. He longed for a return to the pre-Socratic world, a world of tragic beauty, heroic instinct, and raw vitality. Socrates wasn't the disease, he was the first symptom. And we are still infected. In books like Beyond Good and Evil and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he began building what he called a philosophy of the future. But he knew he was only laying the foundation. He introduces concepts like the Übermensch, the human beyond man, who creates values from strength, not weakness, the will to power, not truth, not reason, but pure life force. As the fundamental drive, the idea of eternal recurrence, a radical test of whether your life is worth reliving forever. But Nietzsche never fully finishes this new system. He came to declare that the old world was dying, and something new must rise from its ashes. Socrates was the beginning of our sickness. Nietzsche was the first voice calling for recovery. But the final task, the creation of a post-Socratic philosophy, that's up to us. He wrote the prelude. We must write the rest.